Good morning. Good morning. All right, awesome. Thank you. We've got a great presentation today, but we need to get through a few quick announcements before we get started on that. So I will welcome first Peter and Jalal.
Good morning. We are very excited to announce that the Interfaith Prayer Room is now open and available for students, faculty, and staff. The room is in the lower level of that building in the northwest corner, room number 28, and is available whenever the building is open. This is intended as a quiet, meditative, holy place. Prayer mats and yoga mats are available for your use.
We invite you to embrace the prayer room as a common, neutral, hospitable, genuinely interfaith space. Individual use is come and go as you like. And if you would like to have a group meditation or prayer meeting, please contact Jalal, Julian, or me to schedule. And please join me in thanking Jalal and Julian for their dedication, vision, and thoughtfulness in bringing this project through to completion.
Hey guys, my name is Ronald. I'm coming to you on behalf of Diversity Council. We have 2 slides. If we get the first one, please. So this is just upcoming events for Diversity Council. On September 26th, we have our roundtable talk, Adjusting the Back into College. October 4th is the Bethel College Fiesta. And then the 12th is we're selling curry at Fall Fest. And the 17th is our LGBTQIA+ History Month roundtable talk. And then can we get the next slide? This is more information about our Adjusting Back into College Roundtable Talk. It's at 7 p.m. on the 26th in Howry Hub. Hope you guys come out. Thanks.
What's up, guys? I'm just here to talk again about the Bethel Worship Center. We'll be having another meeting this Sunday here in the FAC at 11 o'clock. So if you want to be part of one of the creative teams, we'd love to have you. We're particularly male heavy, so any girls that want to come out and join us, that'd be great. And then once again, our first service is October 6th. We'll see you then.
What's good, everybody? Alright, thank you. First off, we want to talk about Saturday. Theme for football is blackout. Make sure everybody come out. You know what they say, once you go black, you never go back. But they say first 100 students to the game get a free t-shirt and everything. And then also tonight, I believe at 5:30 and 7, volleyball has some games tonight, and the theme is beach.
I got y'all, relax. There also are soccer games with women's starting at 5 o'clock tonight, and then men's at 7:30. Make sure y'all show up and show out.
Thank you. Today, we are excited to welcome Matt Kleinmann, our speaker. Matt Kleinmann is currently a doctoral student in architecture with a focus on community design and public health at the University of Kansas. As an urban designer, Matt leverages community-based participatory research to empower communities. As the co-founder and co-director of Dot Agency, Matt uses participatory design to reduce health disparities in the built environment. He believes that all people should have the basic human right of living in a healthy neighborhood, and that better design can promote greater access to health for all. He is currently developing a mobile grocery store and advocating for healthier neighborhoods in Kansas City, Kansas. Please welcome Matt Kleinmann.
So thank you all for having me. I'm pretty tall, so I don't know if the mic is going to reach. But can you hear me all? Can you hear me okay? Yeah. So I like to walk around, and I just appreciate you guys for being here. It makes me appreciate how much I miss college, because you guys are full of a lot of energy, and I don't get to be around this many young people all at once, so thank you for being here today. So my name is Matt Kleinmann, doctoral student in architecture, and what I'm going to present to you all is really about a decade's worth of my experiences, the research I've been doing, and the work I'm doing in Kansas City, Kansas. But it's called Design with People because that's kind of the fundamental piece of it. A PhD is effectively a doctorate in philosophy. And so what I want to talk to you all about is partly starting out with this idea of why. Why design with people? Why does design even matter? So in philosophy, there's a guy named Martin Heidegger, and he talks about this idea of Dasein. It's the reason for being. It's why we all exist. It's why we care about stuff, because we want to build things together. We want to build structures together. We want to build our neighborhoods. We want to build our lives. We want to have agency in our own experiences. So Dasein is this idea of being. Another word that's been influential to me in my journey has been this word ikigai. It's a Japanese word. It came out of this public health study the National Geographic did. They saw that people that lived to be 100 years old had these common themes among them. And one of them was in Japan, people grow up and they live to be 100 because they have a reason for getting out of bed every morning. They have a mission. And what they describe is it's when you do what you love and it's your job, you get paid for it, and you're good at it. When those four things overlap, that is your ikigai. And the last one is Kairos. And I didn't know what to expect doing a convocation. I know there's academic styles, there's more theological styles, but Kairos actually has a theological underpinning. It's this idea of time. It's a Greek word. And so the time on your watch is chronos. So when someone says, what time is it? They're talking about chronos time. But in the Bible, they talk a lot about Kairos. When God acts, it's that moment in time. Now is the time to act. Now is the time to be impassioned. So Kairos is this idea that now is the time to be active. And so when you put those together, that's kind of the underpinnings of what I'm going to present to y'all about. You'll see threads of that throughout. I won't beat you over the head with it, but the idea is that putting together how people want to come together to build things, to have purpose in their lives, have agency, and do it now together in ways that actually are meaningful. But this is where it was 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, I was fortunate enough to be on a basketball team that won a national championship. And I thought, hey, I had it made. Life is wonderful. But I remember Danny Manning, if y'all know the name, was a coach on our team at the time. And he went around the room and he goes, Coach Self said, tell everybody where they're going to go professionally. And they go, first round draft pick, lottery pick, first round draft pick, lottery pick, overseas, assistant coach. And they got to me and they go, first round draft pick, lottery pick. And I realized I gotta get a job. And so I graduated in architecture. I was fortunate enough to study architecture. And when I was in school, this is what they taught us. They taught us this kind of like big, global, like massive scale, this beautiful stuff. The architect's name is Rem Koolhaas. He did this in Beijing. And so I graduated amidst the recession. 90% unemployment in my graduating class. 90%. When I entered, every architect got a signing bonus of $5,000. When I left, only 6 people got jobs. And so when I went to grad school, I actually got to go visit China. And I got to see things like the Bird's Nest by Herzog and Neuron. And I saw these massive infrastructure projects, but I was always surprised by what it took to build them. When we walked through neighborhoods, we noticed neighborhoods being torn down. You saw kids' shoes in the dirt. Massive displacement. The Beijing Bird's Nest I just showed you cleared 80,000 residents from their homes. And I remember thinking, dang, like, I don't want to be a part of that. Thank God I live in America. I don't have to be a part of that, right? I'm going to go back. It's going to be wonderful. So I came back to grad school and we were studying urban design. And I was in East St. Louis and North St. Louis, working on projects where we would look at reinvestment and money and community building and development and sustainable infrastructure, and we would come up with these visions. But we didn't actually go talk to people. Brick rustling, disinvestment, racism. The photo on the right is actually from a guy by the name of Theaster Gates. I'd encourage y'all to go look up his TED Talks. Theaster Gates with the Rebuild Foundation out of Chicago, South Side. He was in North St. Louis at the time, And we were touring this space, and it was an interdisciplinary class, law school students, architecture students. We're all different walks of life, but we're all white. And he comes out of the front door and goes, y'all better get inside, or y'all gonna get shot. And we walk inside, and he goes, I just want to express to you the type of panic you just felt is what I felt, what our community feels when a lot of white people come in speculating on housing and development typologies, but they're not here except to make money on our neighborhood. Where are you? You are lawyers, you are architects, you're engineers, you're professionals, but you're not here. Where the are you? And so that resonated with me when I went back to Kansas City as an architect. Worked for a wonderful firm, really great design, all this stuff I could have ever hoped for. And we got to work on this project. This is where I was going to get licensed at 27th Prospect. And this was a building that I was working on for over a year. And I did the drawings and renderings, and I was kind of the low-level architect on the team. But this is what was going on around us that we never saw. We were insulated from. Our profession was insulated from the displacement that was happening in the neighborhoods. 4 city blocks torn down. Communities having no access to the decision-making power that tore down their neighborhoods using eminent domain. And it wasn't until I later did a fellowship on community engagement that I started to examine my own place in this story. And I never intended to be a part of that. I never intended that to be part of what I was working on. I wanted there to be community services. I actually reached out to Fiat and said, hey, let's do some stuff together. Let's make this a great community space. But that wasn't really what we were about, because our client, who we served, was the police department. They didn't really care about this kind of stuff the way we did. And so the photographer of the last photos I showed you used this exhibition, the bricks from the houses and the photographs he took, and standing behind him is the rendering I spent over a month on to visualize what this project would look like. And so I felt this sense of responsibility as an architect for the work that we had done. I did this fellowship in New Orleans, and Katrina had a lot of impact on my generation of architects 10 years ago. But in the aftermath of Katrina in the lower 9th Ward, you saw architects propose visions of design that got them laughed out of the room. They made light of the trauma experienced by disinvested communities. Nobody should take that as a serious proposal. And yet architects put that up there because they weren't talking to people. And when I was there, when you start to survey the landscape, I took the photos on both the left and the right here. What you notice is that even in vacancy, people are rallying together, people are organizing, people are coming together to find commonality, shared ground, shared territory, to make a difference in their communities. And so that got me thinking when I came back to KU, started a PhD, okay, I don't want to do what I was doing, but how do we do it any better? Y'all know who Jon Snow is? Any Game of Thrones fans?
Game of Thrones.
Not that Jon Snow. Jon Snow, call it Outbreak Jon Snow. Anyone know what he's famous for? So it used to be the case that when you died in a city, they said, oh, you had the miasma, you got that bad air killed you. And the belief of the time, science, thought bad air gave you cholera. But he's a surgeon, and he wanted evidence. And so he started cutting people open after they died and realized it wasn't the lungs that made them sick, it was their gut. And so he put forth a theory. And his theory was this: it was the water. He went door to door and mapped out every single household death. And you'll notice, I guess you could use it later, was one is the prison. Where is it? I think the prison's there. 5 deaths. The brewery, none. The prison had their own well. Brewery brewed their own beer. Nobody was drinking the water. Pump, all the death. He proposed changing the built environment to improve health. He took a handle off the water pump. What had happened was the pipes underground, the water for drinking and the sewage water had leaked into one another. People were drinking raw sewage, and that's what kills people. That's what gave people cholera. He's the father of modern epidemiology. There's a great book called Ghost Maps if you're interested. Another guy, about 30 years later, comes along, 40 years later. Jacob Riis. Flash photography, we all got our iPhones. He was the first one to take flash photography into tenement housing.
He published a book called How the Other Half Lives, where he documented the living experiences of people crammed into New York City tenement housing slums. Within 10 years, he changed the zoning ordinances to prohibit lived experiences like this. How he did it was he organized communities by going to Rotary clubs and churches across the country, raising money on early versions of carousel slideshows, showing his photographs to explain to people, this is what people have to experience. He documented it, and he advocated, and he changed policy to make the lives of others better. How many of you are all familiar with this map? Anybody know? If you know, shout it out. What is this? What kind of map is it? Show of hands, how many of y'all have ever heard of redlining? Redlining. You see the red neighborhoods, the yellow neighborhoods, the blue and the green? Is a process of de jure segregation. Our government put laws into effect that segregated our communities. The residential security maps in the 1930s, keep in mind this is only about 40 years after Jacob Riis passed the tenement housing policy in New York City. Systemically disinvested minority residents by drawing boundaries around their neighborhoods and telling people where they could and could not live. They quantified these in ways that were racist, and they were bigoted across the board, equal opportunity bigots. But they did this, and this affected whether or not your family could get a mortgage and move out of the neighborhood. Segregation was put into law by redlining, one of the many ways it was. But when you read the actual notes, detrimental influences, Negro slum area, habitants, laborers and ne'er-do-wells, infiltration, Russian Jews, and they rated based on the percentage of Negro. That's a pretty tame note. There are a lot worse. This is how our cities were divided. Highways followed redlining to divide D and C neighborhoods from B and A neighborhoods. And so, about 30 years after that, civil rights leader Whitney Young helped get the Civil Rights Act passed, called out architects in the room to their face, 1968 National Convention in Portland. You are not a profession that has distinguished itself by your social and civic contributions to the cause of civil rights, and I'm sure this has not come as any shock. You are most distinguished by your thunderous silence and your complete irrelevance. This did not just happen. We did not find ourselves in this situation. It was carefully planned. And he was right. This is what every architect who cares about social justice and the built environment always uses as this their keystone. Because architects have known about this for 50 years, longer. But we heard it to our face 50 years ago, and we're still grappling with that. And so what happened around this time was the Model Cities program came up. The federal government said, hey, we're going to fix this. We're going to put a lot of money in the Model Cities, over 100. But this is where it gets funky. How we decide how to make decisions is just as important as how we address these problems. A famous document in urban planning theory, Ladders of Citizen Participation, looked at just because you do community engagement doesn't mean one size fits all. Well, community engagement is not equal across the board. They looked at non-participation, tokenism, and citizen power. And they found that this is where real power lies in the community. But oftentimes we end up with this, where it's a one-way street, or somebody meets to check the box, and they call that community engagement. She literally calls it out and just says people are being planned for, but not with. So architects in recent years have come up with different ways of addressing this. Spatial agency is one term that the group I helped found about 5 years ago kind of captured, is this idea that there are top-down decision makers and there are bottom-up community organizers, but really the overall agency of being able to translate. When a community says, I want a community garden, to go to the urban planning director and says, we need to change the zoning ordinance so we can have community gardens, to go back to the community and says, we need to draw a plan, to go back to the city and says, we need to get this bill, this zoning ordinance approved. That process is spatial agency. We change the built environment by being advocates and allies, but also drawing and articulating it. That's how we go about doing our work. But we're a little unique because one of the things we focus on is health equity. When you look at the determinants of health, it's like if you were to only heal somebody when they're in the hospital, only when they're sick, it's like somebody's drowning in a river and you're only helping pull them out. Well, why don't you go upstream and help them from falling in the river in the first place? Upstream health says, look at our neighborhoods, look at our policies, look at how we build our environments. The social determinants of health is another model that's gaining traction right now. They look at neighborhood and physical environment. They look at our food systems. They look at our social contexts. But they say our health should not be defined by our zip codes. Where you're born today determines your life expectancy more than your own DNA. Public health research has evidence to back that up. That should not be the case. And so when community engagement gets talked about, it's really this fuzzy idea. But the National Institutes for Health went out and said, hey, give us like a straight answer. What are the 9 principles for community engagement? I won't read them, but we took them and adapted them for design. At the end of the day, it's about turning power over to residents. It's about building their capacity to be agents of change in their own lives. It's about building strong people and not relying on strong leaders. And so what does this look like? These are my colleagues, Shannon, Chris, and Niels Gore. Niels is the one pointing there, and Shannon is the one drawing here. Niels is known for building stuff. Shannon is really good about meeting people. So for us, we invite students to participate. We ask them to build prototypes. And we do that because when we put them in the built environment, it helps build trust. We make this process as accessible as possible. We appeal to democracy. We make it tangible because we know we can't build trust if all we do is talk. We actually have to show up and build something every now and then. We invite kids to be participants in this process, where the visions they have for an urban farm next door to theirs that'll supply their school with fresh food, we get to help create. It's about getting your hands dirty sometimes. It's about cleaning up sidewalks. Sidewalks are a key indicator of the health of the neighborhood. We develop toolkits, but we also try to build relationships with our community partners. We record stories. We let our community members tell their own stories. We share those stories to validate them, and then we connect people around those stories so people have a better understanding of the neighborhood environment within which they are living. The term for that is social cohesion. But if you can build strong social fabric, that helps also improve public health outcomes. We find the community members that are already in these spaces. This is the Parkwood Neighborhood Association on the left. They had developed a plan over 20 years ago that nobody had ever built anything for. We came in with about a few $1,000, built as much as we could. We built it using participatory mapping exercises that we built from scratch, and we brought them out to the parks and put them on tables and said to the kids, let's play a game. They would tell us where a park bench should go, where a tree should go, where a trail should go, where they felt safe, where they didn't feel safe. And then we photographed it, and we took that back, and we talked to Parks and Rec, and we got some things installed. We identified barriers to access. What you see on the left is a sidewalk to nowhere. That's developed by a consent decree because the federal government, again, looking at the zero segregation, said, yeah, we haven't done right for this community, so we're going to build accessible sidewalks. They don't talk about building actual sidewalks down the street. We talked about changing the narrative. The signage on the right says, don't do this, prohibited, can't be here, don't do that. We're going to close it if you do this. We work with Youth Build KCK. It's an apprenticeship program to the Department of Labor, so the young people in the community are actually building the things that we're helping design. So I work with them directly with part of my time. We share resources with them so that they get funded to go build stuff. We built signage that welcomed people. We took down a sign that had been up there for over 10 years with bullets in it, put up a sign that says, welcome to the park in English and Spanish. And we made it fun. We learned from our community. This space was almost dead empty when I observed it 3 out of the 4 times I was there. But the 4th time I was there, it was a quinceañera birthday party, and it was packed, and it was lit up, and there was beer, and there was tacos, and it was incredible. But all that was the community bringing that life to the space. So we listened to them. We also didn't realize in a mostly black neighborhood, or so we assumed based on demographics, that the Latino community would be really, really strong. So we adapted and we reflected the community back to them in signage that we put up that talked about some of the health benefits of being more physically active from a type 2 diabetes perspective. We work together to evaluate. We work together to come together. We break bread together. Because of this example of projects, we were invited, it's kind of, the image is a little dark, but we were invited by the Parkwood Neighborhood Association to their annual Thanksgiving dinner. With food, we translate. We translate languages with our community health workers who are jobs as advocates to connect people to community spaces. We verify assumptions. One of the maps that I was given said, this is where a grocery store is. It wasn't a grocery store, it was the corporate headquarters of a grocery store. Nobody cared about the neighborhood around the corporate headquarters, but there was no food there. And so we draw. A lot of what we do is draw. And anytime you work with communities, I would encourage you, ask them to draw. So this is what our final map looked like. This is a map of all the food access locations in Wyandotte County with a comprehensive bus system overlay so people can actually find where they want to go. We also draw visions. When people say, hey, we'd like to see a mobile market, well, what's that going to look like? So as an architect, you can render things, but it doesn't take an architecture degree to actually start drawing ideas. One of the things we started to learn is about how to build budgets. When you follow where the money goes, you see where power and decisions get made. So we do participatory budgeting, where people can decide, hey, it's a couple $1,000, let's vote. Let's be democratic. Let's decide how we want to spend that money. And we use that to build evidence, because we want to change zoning policies. We did that. We changed the zoning ordinance that would not allow a mobile grocery store to go anywhere but a commercial district. Well, when we asked people, where do you want a mobile market to go, only 14% of the locations were commercially districted. The other were neighborhoods, schools, churches, parks. So our community council, we organized on a shared governance framework. We give full power to the community of representatives. Anybody can show up. Once you're in 2 meetings, you're in the group. They've made all the decisions. What are we going to carry? Where are we going to go? How do we want to approach this idea of a mobile grocery store? We meet people where they are. A big factor in this work is not assuming just because you're trying to do it, people know that you even exist. So we oftentimes go out into communities and work with them, and showing up is a big part of that. And we have a philosophy, it's called small bets. Not trying to save the world, trying to just take one thing and dive deep on it. But those small bets, if they're going to be successful, need to have big impact. So we look at health data, we look at access. So we know that in the 15 locations that our mobile market will be at, 43,500 people will be within walking distance of all 15 on a weekly basis once we launch. We ally with advocates. We celebrate champions. It's Rachel and Broderick. I work with them on a daily basis. I don't work for them, but everything we do, we lift them up. We document the process, but we also document decisions. A lot of times we work in spaces where politics gets really messy. And so if you're not telling people why you came to a decision or how you came to the decision, or you're not even showing that decisions were even made, people question that. And so having rules in place and having ways of talking about how decisions get made is really important, but also making it democratic. And so our goal is to build healthier neighborhoods and build with everybody. That's kind of what we do at that agency, but that's, I think, a goal that all of us can share in. And because it's a convocation, a guiding scripture for me is to simply love God and love thy neighbor. I'm a United Methodist. My wife's a non-practicing Hindu. We make it work because we ascribe to loving God and loving our neighbors. But I want to be clear on one thing, this idea of Kairos. Today's the global climate strike. I don't know if you've seen that. So today's one of those Kairos moments. The time is now for that kind of stuff. And I was encouraged to discover along the way recently the Kairos documents. This came out of South Africa. Next week will be the 34th anniversary of the document. This is out of South Africa ministers who called out the system of apartheid, where evangelical and other kind of white clergymen were oppressing the black clergy in the community, and they were using the Bible to justify that. And so they talk about how we need to be more involved and more participatory, not just responding to trauma, but also advocating for justice. And I appreciate this one specifically, the Kairos Europa document, because other countries and other continents have done their own Kairos documents after it, that talks about how we need to have grassroots groups and local alternatives where communities can realize the vision of a new society. We can learn from each other, we can share, we can cooperate, and we can value people and communities. And so a project I'm working on right now that's getting picked up from the printer today, and we're going to have it on display on Monday, is a project called Holding Space, which came out of the AIA, National AIA Design Justice Summit I attended last fall. And Holding Space is an exhibit, but this is kind of a detailed shot of a couple of the graphics I'll be hanging up. The artist is J.T. Daniels. He's an artist that grew up at 10th and Quindaro in Kansas City, Kansas, and this is going to go in a grocery store at 1726 Quindaro in Kansas City, Kansas. And he visualized this idea of what it would be like for people with different faiths and cultures to come out of a food desert. You heard of food desert, it's where you can't find food, and into a food forest. And how overjoyed they'd be, but also how they would find each other in that shared struggle. I listened to historians from the communities. Mr. Chester Owens, 86 years old, gave me a 2.5-hour 2.5-hour dissertation on how the community has been neglected for over 50 years. But he told me about the 30 grocery stores in an area that serves 21,000 residents over the last 50, 60 years, and today there's not one. So we mapped them out, we drew them out, 5th and Quindaro, all the way up. Our project will be right around here in the grocery co-op space, and that's where these will be on display. And then recently, we've been trying to increase diversity in the profession of architecture itself. Trying to inspire the youth. I became an architect largely just because I met an architect. I had privilege and access to that. So we introduced Project Pipeline about a month ago with the National Organization of Minority Architects, and we asked the kids to look at the Northeast Area Master Plan, and they were inspired to come up with design ideas. One group talked about how they didn't want to fight. They didn't want to have fights at school anymore because they were afraid that if a fight broke out, somebody might get shot. So they wanted to create a safe place to fight by building a water balloon station. Another group of 8 and 9-year-olds talked about how they were afraid to walk to school because there's no sidewalks in our neighborhood. So they built a movable crossing guard to keep themselves safe. On Saturday, they designed it. On Sunday, they built it at Youth Build KCK. And on Monday, they presented it. This is the movable crossing guard. They had a whole water balloon fight. Images are kind of blurry, but you get the idea. And in this space that these will be on display, we've had a wide variety of community allies, over 500 hours spent, 21,000 invested in just manpower alone, where we cleaned up an abandoned hardware store, we cleaned it out with community involvement, we've had events there to organize a new grocery co-op. Like the Kairos document says, creating self-sustaining systems, having food sovereignty are some of the first steps you can do to building a local community that thrives. And I'll end with a quote from one of my good friends, Brian Lee, who's a design justice platform that helped sponsor some of the funding for these projects, is that every revolution begins with the reclaiming of space. And so what we're working towards with design in the built environment is trying to reclaim space so we can have conversations about health and the underlying reasons why health and bad health exists and how to improve that with lifting up our communities so that they can be leaders as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. We are open for questions from the audience. We'll have the form sent out for electronic questions in just a minute. Technology is slow, but please consider the question. Consider asking your question out loud. We have mics going around.
Hi, thank you so much for coming and presenting today. It was a really interesting topic. I was wondering if you had a favorite project and if you could speak more on it.
So, I don't know if I have a favorite project. A lot of them have meant a lot to me over the years. I think the mobile market as a whole has been almost 3 or 4 years in the going. We've had a lot of failure. We've had a lot of success. Maybe my biggest joy in that has been when it started, it was funded by Humana Health Insurance Company. And it enlisted the Nourish KC nonprofit, which is a Episcopal Community Services, faith-based social service organization. And that's how we went for about 2 years. And then we formed a community council because we were told by everybody in the neighborhood, yeah, this ain't gonna fly if it's top down. It needs to be bottom up. So we built a community council. We gave them power. We trained them. We coached them. They took on ownership. And then Nourish KC misspent all of our money. And about a year ago, I lost my job because I started working for them more time. And we went out of business effectively. But we did it because the community stayed together. And every single one of our funders has doubled down and recommitted funding back to us because the community council is strong and they are still organizing. And I think that just speaks to the theory that when you give power to community members and allow them to be advocates and champions in their own environment, great things can happen. And I think that as a project, we're still working towards a launch sometime early next year. But that kind of lifts my spirits, thinking that I'm not just preaching, but we're actually having the seeds take root and grow. But maybe to the most recent favorite, we had a young girl, Rhythm, who could not get a minute in without asking a question at Project Pipeline. Every single, her questions were like the most precocious 8, 9-year-old questions you could imagine. And she wrote a note to us on the last day that made everybody tear up and cry that said, when are we doing this next year? I miss you all. We're all ready. And so that type of impact, I think, That's not an architecture thing, but I think that starts to change the culture a little bit. And I think that's the type of stuff that we really, that keeps us going.
A question from online, or from the responses was, why isn't systematic racism addressed in terms of neighborhoods more regularly by our society's architects and workers?
Why is it addressed more by architects and workers? Is that the question?
Yes.
I would say it's not. I would say it's not more often addressed by architects. I would say I'm a somewhat unique example. Architects are not typically engaged in this because we serve clients. If you were a room of architecture students, I might sugarcoat that a little bit better. But architects are not alone in this fight. But frankly, neither is any other singular profession. This work in systemic racism has taken decades to get in, and it was real estate, it was investment bankers, it was commercial properties, it was neighborhood associations, it was so many other decisions, and it's a system. That's why they call it systemic disinvestment. Architects are not the only thing in this. We work very closely with community organizers, social workers, community health workers. We work across the board. Urban planners are a part of the table. Teachers are a part of the table. So just because you might not be an architect, don't feel like you can't have a stake in this game, because this is a system that affects everybody. And so I only present the architecture side because a lot of times when we talk about health outcomes because of systemic disinvestment, in Turtle Hill neighborhood, the average life expectancy is 59.7 years. In Piper, same county, it is 17 years higher. What's really underlining that is poverty. What we're really talking about is poverty. That said, when you talk about health equity, we have 86,000 people living within access to a lot of parks, but they don't have many grocery stores. So the built environment, as social determinants of health will tell us, shapes health. The problem is that when you go talk to public health people, they know all these problems exist. They know that social determinants of health matter. They know that neighborhoods matter. But they don't know how to fix it because they are not trained to go out and build healthy neighborhoods. So we're one piece of the continuum, but we're not the only piece. So wherever you guys find yourselves, just realize that this system can encompass all of us. It should encompass all of us, because it all got here because everybody allowed it to get that way.
Another question is, what can we as students do to help end systematic racism?
Organize. Get to know each other. Have conversations. I mean, I'm not an expert in any systemic racism, and I don't think there is anyone that's an expert in it, because if there was, then we probably wouldn't still have it as much of an issue as today. That said, there are many groups, and I think the one thing I will encourage you all is you guys have way more power than you realize. Way more power. If you all wanted something to happen on campus today, and you all stood up and demanded it, it would happen. But you have to organize, you have to talk to each other, you have to work together, you have to have meals together, you have to have dialogue with one another, you have to get to know each other and value each other as people. You have that power. And as students, people listen. Who's the biggest climate change activist right now? Anybody know? Right now?
16-year-old.
Greta Thunberg. 16-year-old girl crossed the Atlantic in a paddle boat. 16 spoke before Congress the other day. Age does not matter. You guys have more power than you realize. You just have to organize.
Why aren't we educated about all this from a younger age, especially with all the suffering there is in the world?
Man, you guys are asking like a life-changing question. I don't know. I think systemic racism, part of it is that we erase histories and cultures. We don't tell stories. We don't celebrate the marginalized. I can't get into educational theory because I don't know enough to speak on, but I can tell you this. I grew up in a school district that was mostly white. I'd say 98% white. And I never thought about it. But later on I learned that if money solved our problems, right, we would have great schools everywhere. Missouri versus Jenkins. Kansas City, Missouri School District was sued by one of their students. Didn't start that way. The school district said, yo, why do we have no money for our schools? Why do we have no money for our books and our teachers? It's because the school districts decided to fragment. Because they realized that they couldn't segregate post-Brown v. Board, but they could create other school districts out in the burbs that just happened to be mostly white. And because of redlining, when black communities and Latino communities could get loans in those white communities, those neighborhoods stayed mostly white. So the school districts, where neighborhoods dropped in property value, they had all this infrastructure debt to pay, couldn't maintain their schools. Missouri versus Jenkins, a lawsuit went through the federal court system. The judge said, I'm going to give $1 billion, I'm going to tax the western half of Missouri to do it. $1 billion to Kansas City. He created what's called the DSEG system, where he appointed special people to be in charge and did not care about increasing the quality of education. The stated goal in public deposition in court record was they only spent money to get white kids to come back to black schools. They built a Olympic school with an underwater viewing tank. They hired a Russian fencing coach to fly from the USSR to America to teach fencing, all to attract white students back to black schools. And it worked for a little while, but it didn't last. Money is not the problem. How we make decisions is the problem. How we talk to one another is the problem. We don't learn from each other. I don't know how we're going to get schools to teach that better, but we need to. We need to be more honest and open about it, but we also need to figure out that we can work together to make it a better system.
Thanks a lot, Matt, for speaking today.
I'm trying to figure out how there you are.
Yeah, sorry. Does the DOT agency have people they're collaborating with in other cities other than just Kansas City, or do you have like goals to go out into other cities around the U.S., or like what is the next steps with the DOT agency?
Man, if I knew that answer. We're not funded by our universities. We created it because our university said, you need to go through your advisory board, and they said, you need to merge with this organization. And we said, no, we don't want to. We want to let our community lead us. So we created it ad hoc. That agency is not a legal entity. It's 2 professors on a full tenure salary position and 1 doctoral student, myself, scrapping for employment here and there with our community partners. We don't have plans to expand because we don't have the capacity. We're looking to build that capacity with foundations. We're in a scarcity mindset with a lot of health equity issues where we can get grants of $25,000, $50,000, $75,000. But sustaining funding to do this work is a lot harder to do. We've worked outside of our districts. We've met with elected officials. We've worked in KCMO a little bit with our local WIS, which is a community development agency. But one of the things we realized is one of the centerpieces of the participatory design principles. For this work to be successful, you have to be there in the long term. There was a study done with mostly African-American males about who do you trust in your neighborhood? And they looked at different professions. And it turns out there were really only 3 factors. Are they present? Are they knowledgeable and accessible? And do they get stuff done? It didn't matter if you were a doctor, attorney. If you were those 3 things, people trusted you. And so our social currency is trust. We have community partners that watch out for us. They invite us to work with projects. We can walk into spaces and make mistakes, but because we're honest and authentic and we take the time to be there, we're not a paid consultant getting hired, taking money, extracting information, putting a report out there and walking away. No, we're there for the long haul, so we build trust. But part of the reciprocal in that is we can't necessarily just walk away and start doing stuff elsewhere because we have no capacity to do that. I think the model, though, what we're talking about, you don't need to be an architect to do it. It doesn't take an architect to clean a It doesn't take an architect to work with kids. It doesn't take an architect to swing a hammer. It just so happens that I think design has some inherent ability because when you're designing, you're really creating. And creation is a part of this because we need to create new systems. But that doesn't require, architecture doesn't require that agency. I think it's a model of practice. It's more of a philosophy that we can all adopt, but I think if that agency has to move to another city, we're gonna be in trouble. Somebody back there.
Yes, sir. So this is basketball related.
Yeah, I'm waiting for one of these.
Did you know that you guys are going to win the Natty when Chalmers hit that 3 to send it to overtime? If you have the ring on, you throw a slight flex.
No, and I'll tell you a funny story. The no, because I didn't know, because I was one of the few guys that was looking up at the scoreboard trying to figure out, did we tie? Are we down one? Are we up one? The ring, no, because it doesn't fit me anymore. I've gained probably 50 pounds since my playing days, and so my fingers are back. And my wife would also give me a hard time if I wore it because she was a very Tiger alum. She's a KU law grad now, but very Tiger alum. But my funny story was, and this is just the one basketball story I'll tell. It's fun like this. If you see the footage after the game, the one I showed, the photograph I showed, I was wearing my jersey. I didn't play a minute in the game. All the athletes in the room were my athletes. Some athletes, I'm sure. I took my warm-up off and ran on my court with 3 seconds left in the game to get in the photos. I wanted my jersey so they could put my number, which meant they would have to caption it. Matt Kleinmann who did not play. They didn't say that. And Darrell Arthur, just 20 points, 10 rebounds, on the front page of USA Today. So keep that in mind when you guys are winning your championship. Take the warm-ups off so they can see who you are.
So we've had a repeated question. People are wanting to know how tall you are.
How tall I am?
Yes.
Anyone want to guess? 6'10". I would say I was 6'10", but every athlete knows that you always add an inch. I'm 6'9".
Matt, thank you so much. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for your question. Thank you for your engagement.